Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Haze and I'm an artist and speed painter from Malaysia. So today we'll be painting this complex painting and I'll be sharing some tips and how to go about painting something so complex in Procreate. So let's get started. So I found a picture of a girl online and it's actually a doll. So now I'm using the liquify tool in Procreate to adjust some of the features and see how I can go about it. I'm pushing her hands to be closer to her body because I think that the joints on the doll is a bit restricted, so I need it to be closer so that it gives a more intimate feeling for the painting. I wanted to have some goldfishes in the illustration, so I have to go onto Pinterest and onto the web to look for some references for the goldfishes. I usually spend a lot of time looking for references, and this is where all my time is spent in the beginning of the process. Once I've saved all the images for my references, I begin to load them into Procreate and do some positioning, and I just roughly erase away the background so that I can see how it looks like in the composition. I do this for every goldfish and I'm trying to figure out the line of movement and the line of focus for the entire illustration as I am placing them all around the painting. So the first step in every complex illustration is always composition and to figure out where everything needs to be and where you need to focus on and where is actually just background information. When it comes to fishes, they are always swimming along a line of current in the water, so I need to make sure that the fishes are swimming according a line so that it looks smooth and looks a lot more natural. This also means that the more fishes I add, the harder it is to get them to be fluid in terms of composition because I need to worry about where they are facing and if it's facing in the direction of the current. And I'm also trying to use a goldfish to face the face of the girl so that when the viewer looks at the painting, they are immediately drawn to the face of the girl because of the way that a goldfish head is facing her face. So in a way, my objectives for this current process of composition is to have the fishes flow along a line of current and also to have some of the fishes to direct the viewer's eye towards the face of the girl. After I'm happy with the fishes and the face, I start to save the file and export it as a JPEG so that I can use it as a fresh reference when I'm sketching. So now I have my fresh reference here on the side or in my multitasking pane, and I'm just drawing the flowing line of the current to get the flow of the composition first on my Procreate. I'm just using my sketch brush. So if you're new here, you know you can always download my brushes in the link provided right here for free. So when you're using multiple references within the same illustration, it's very important not to trace the elements out because that might make your painting a bit stiff. So it's a bit better if you just sketch everything out all over again. That way it will be easier for you to adjust if you need to change certain directions and the flows of certain lines. So for this first pass of the sketch, I am just trying to get all the lines down and seeing how I can flow all the lines along the initial idea of the current. So now I'm just trying to sketch in for real for the face, and I'm trying to do a very clean sketch so that I have something nice to look at while I work on the rest of the painting. So because this illustration is very complex, I do not want to create any more draft sketch layers, so now I'm trying to go for the final look already. And for the fish, when I'm sketching it, I'm trying to be mindful about how the fins and the tail flow so that they follow the current of my illustration. So for now, the portrait is on one layer and all the other fishes and the sketch is on another layer, so I just have two layers of this final sketch. Once the fishes are done, I can then use the fishes as a guide for the current, and I'm actually using the hair to illustrate the flow of the water. So right now it's basically just connecting the dots between the fishes and getting down the composition because the flow of the hair and the curves are very important to establish this composition. So as you can see here, I'm experimenting with certain flows of lines and seeing how they would fit within the composition and if the whole thing would flow well. So once the big shapes are down, I can start adding details to the hair and also trying out some new ideas here to connect the flow to improve the composition, but I can always change my mind if I decide to. Then at this stage, I have a clearer idea of how the illustration would look like, and I started shifting things around to improve the composition and also to try to complete the painting in terms of composition. So I'm trying to add a lot more details in terms of intricacy, because even though it looks very noisy when it's a sketch, once you lay down the colors, the painting will actually look a lot more simpler, so a lot of details would go a long way. And now I want to add some aquatic plants into the painting, and I want to give it a defying gravity look, so I decided to do the flowers upside down, and now I'm just laying the shapes for the flowers so that I know where to place each sketch within them. But would you believe it if I tell you that after all this work, I sketched the lilies, and after that I painted it, and then I realized that it looks completely shit, so I've decided at the end of the process to delete the lily. But it's so wasted, but I had to do it because the lily is just not pretty enough to complement the painting. The drawing actually looks okay now, but actually later when I painted the flowers, it really looked quite bad. But I'm just gonna proceed and show you guys what I did after this, because right after this I actually merged most of the layers together and separate them into the fish, the flowers, and also the girl layer. And then after that I started to clean up the lines and erase some of the parts of the sketch that are going to be covered by things that are on top of it. So now I actually have about 3 layers, one for the flower, one for the fish, and one for the portrait, and I'm just going to do the background colors for each of them, trying to redefine the mask for all the borders of the painting. So here you can see how I organize my layers, and I'm actually using mask to erase the lines for objects that are on top of each other. So the reason why I use mask instead of eraser is so that if in case I need to move things around, I still have the line work ready for me. For example, I'm actually painting black on the mask for the lotus layer to erase this lotus leaf where it overlaps with the goldfish. But in case I move this around later on, I can still access the line work because it's right beneath the mask. And now I name all my sketch layers properly because I'm about to paint down the color for each layer. So right beneath each layer, I create a new layer and I begin painting on it. So the first layer that I'll be painting is the face color, and I'm not worried about what color I'm using. I'm just worried about getting the shape of this color background to match the border of the sketch. This is so that later on when I'm painting the face, I'm only painting on this layer and I will not be able to mess up all the other elements because I'm painting within the color. And now I'm doing the base color for the flowers below the flower sketch layer. And also another new layer for the fish where all of them are in the same color. And finally, I do the mask painting for the hair. So if you take a look at the way my layers are organized, you will see very clearly that beneath each sketch layer is the base painting layer, which I'm gonna use as a mask when I am painting. So now if you turn on the alpha mode for any of the layers, you can just paint within the sketch or the color. And this is how you can change colors easily. And now that I have all my mask and bases done, I can then change colors for all the lines and the color beneath them and try and establish a color scheme. So after I've settled with a color scheme that I think is pretty okay, I decided to just stop at this point and work before I continue to play with the color scheme further. So right now I'm on my layer for my face sketch on the line layer, and I am just turning on the alpha mode and painting it over with some color to color the sketch. I'm not actually painting on the layer where I painted the color of the skin. This is actually just the line work sketch layer for the face. Then I introduce some more colors in the waves or the hair and try to keep it a little bit more flat and illustrative this time. I wanted the hair to be a flat color without a lot of details, but I wanted some gradient where the lines meet to show some form, and a little bit of modeling, so I'm just putting down the shadings for now and keeping this whole hair piece a single color and monotonous. And then after that I can start working on the goldfishes. So for the goldfishes, I wanted to maintain an illustrative feel to it instead of it being very realistic. So I'm trying to keep a lot of lines and see how I can simplify most of the details. I'm also deciding if the fins and the tail should be transparent or faded out at the ends. So I'm just trying out a new idea and see if I should do it that way or keep it opaque. In the end, I decided to fade out the tails and the fins, and also I gave it a very solid outline around the body to draw attention to it being an illustration instead of a painting. As I begin working on the other fishes, I am very mindful about what colors I use, and I'm trying not to introduce any new colors anymore into the painting. I'm just trying to remain within the same color palette so that there's consistency throughout the entire painting. So for the faded out tail sections, I smudge in from outside so that it appears a little bit more erased and faded in, but then it still has the strokes of the fin. And I'm using just the flat brush smudge. Then after that, I use the sketch brush to sketch in all the lines for the tail to give them a little bit more definition. I also use the eraser to erase some lines away so that it'll appear a little bit more transparent. I'm still changing the color of the background all the time because I'm not sure what color I should go with. I'm trying to use a lot of lines when it comes to the fins and tails so that I have this consistent style of having sketch lines all over the illustration. Also for this painting, I make sure that the darkest color that I use is not black, and I try to maintain a very blue tone when it comes to using my darkest color. Because there are only 2 layers in every component, the sketch and the color, it's very easy for me to edit just the lines or just the color because I do not have a confusing amount of layers. As I'm painting, I'm also trying to clean up the lines because I like to keep my process short. So right now I am at the coloring stage and I do not want to go over this stage again by refining the details. So I'm trying to achieve the entire look that I'm going for in the final result. So in a way, it's easier to just work slow but to get it right the first time. So before I proceed, I started to clean up all the things that are behind the fins and the tails, and I'm just trying to settle down with a background color, but I just can't find the color that I want. I'm kind of liking this yellow at this moment, so we'll see what happens. So for now, I'm just coloring the water lilies, but the water lilies didn't turn out very well. I'll just show you how it looks like after I color it. I actually tried to change the color, but I didn't really like how it looked. I think it's probably the drawing itself wasn't that nice anyway. So I actually have this illustration in my Procreate for quite some time, and I stopped working on it because of these flowers, and it was really demotivating for me to look at it. So in the end, I decided to change to another type of flowers. So I decided to change to peonies, and this is actually how I do the peonies. I'm going to walk you through how I do these flowers step by step. It's actually going to be in blue color and they will turn out really pretty. So I hope you like it. So basically, once I'm done with the flowers, I actually position them into the painting where the lotuses were, and I scale them and rotate them to size. So to start with, I actually just sketch the shape down with the darkest color and I fill it up with a flat color. Then I create a new layer on top of this base. And on this layer, I roughly sketch the shape of the petals, just roughly, just to know where to put everything else. And then I make sure to create a new layer separate from this sketch layer. Then I switch brush to the Sketch Hard Blunt Fade. This is from my sketch brush pack. So this brush actually fades out halfway when you are sketching with it. I began to paint the petals in strokes starting from all the petals that is inside the flower. And because the brush fades out, it actually fades down to the background color of the dark blue, which instantly give it a blended look. Once the strokes are done, I pick a slightly lighter color to do the mid-tones for these petals. Once I'm done, I start to work on a new group of petals that are behind these groups. As usual, I start with the darker color first and then I move on to the next lighter color. I continue laying down strokes for all the petals that are behind this bunch that I've already painted. Once these petals from the background and the inner layers are painted, I can then paint the petals that are in front of these petals. So I quickly use this brush to lay down strokes to get the shape of the petal first. Then I use the next lighter color to define the modeling of this petal. So painting one petal at a time like this is really a lot easier compared to sketching out the whole flower and painting everything meticulously, because with a natural brush stroke that you are doing like this, everything looks a lot more spontaneous and natural. Therefore, even though it feels slow when you're working like this, it's actually quicker because you're doing everything right the first time around, instead of having to sketch and then do a sketch layer and then paint it a base and then after that do the gradient and then after that refining again. So this is called one stroke painting, which will greatly help you reduce the time spent on painting anything. Now I'm starting to build more petals in front and adding more highlights as I go that are a lot brighter. For petals behind all these that I've painted, I actually create another layer beneath everything so that I can have petals behind these layers without disturbing the current layout of petals. So I tend to switch back and forth between a few layers while I'm working on the flower. So as I'm painting, I'm actually changing the size of the brush to match each petal size so that I'm achieving the stroke with just one time. But for the bigger petals, of course, I use multiple strokes to show the curvature of the petal. For big petals like these in the foreground, I use really big size brush and I try to get a really smooth gradient and very pretty brush strokes, so I tend to do the brush stroke multiple times until I am satisfied with them. If you notice as I'm painting, I'm not using the smudge tool at all to blend. I'm just using the faded side of this brush to create all the gradients that I want, and this keeps the painting a lot more neater. Also, I work from dark to light, from tone to tone. I do not jump from the darkest color to the lightest color. I try to use all the in-between colors first to make it as smooth as possible. Once you begin to see the petals in terms of brush strokes, and you paint them in this manner, you will start to enjoy painting flowers because they are such joy to do all the brush strokes and the directions that it's facing. So once I'm done, I just erase the dark background and place them into my painting, and then after that I have to give them all outlines because everything in this illustration has a lot of line work, and if this flowers doesn't have line work, it won't look like it match the illustration at all. Also, when you're working on an illustration with a lot of line work, you have to be mindful about how thick your lines are in relation to the lines in the rest of your painting. So if your lines are suddenly thick and suddenly thin, then it's going to be very apparent when people look at the painting as a whole. As we are nearing the finishing part of the painting process, now we are back to finishing touches, and the more effort you put into finishing touches, it actually just improves the painting by a little bit. But it really matters because it actually can elevate the value of your painting. So the more time you spend in detailing and finishing your painting can really determine how much your painting is worth. So I'm very happy with how these flowers turned out compared to the lily before. This one looks a lot better and I can finally connect all of them, and instead of doing straight lines like before, I'm just going to do sweeping curves to match the flowy composition of this painting. And I've also decided on the background color by splitting it half into yellow and the other half into dark blue, and I feel that this really draws the attention properly and it is not too overwhelmingly bright nor high contrasty. So I think this is a very good balance, and we just have to finish up the painting and we are good to go. I really like how the flowers are flipping upside down and how the girl is oriented facing away from the canvas, so everything is kind of like hanging in the air and not very grounded, as I would say. I feel that this painting can only be called sketch because it's not as finished as I would like to be, as the line work are not as clean for print or anything that can be blown up large size, but I'm still very happy with how it turns out. Maybe one day I'll just clean it up and repaint it so that it's a bit cleaner. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned a lot during this tutorial. This painting will be up soon for purchase in my website hazelong.com. As with all the other portraits that I've painted before, I have a really nice treat for you guys the next tutorial, so I'll see you next time. Bye!